This episode of Murky Sebs Wild Underwater Adventures is sponsored by Angler New South Wales. Link in the video description.
It's our third day in Granite National Park and we haven't had much luck so far. The rivers are all much higher and flowing much quicker than I was expecting them to be. Normally this time of year there hasn't been anywhere near as much rain and the rivers would all be low and the fish would be confined to smaller pools. But with the rivers flowing this quickly, it means that the fish are way more spread out and much harder to find. We're going to check out the rivers in northern New South Wales today and see what fish are living there. They're probably going to be quite high and fast flowing and murky, but hopefully we'll be able to find some fish living in the rivers of northern New South Wales. There's a lot marked on the map, so hopefully we are able to get to them all.
And on the way back to camp, I noticed this medium-sized kangaroo standing right next to the path. They stood perfectly still for about a minute until I started walking, and then they hopped off towards a much larger kangaroo and another medium-sized one. They then stood still and blended in quite well with the surrounding area as I went back to my tent to get ready to check out the rivers of northern New South Wales. The first river we crossed was much higher than usual and unfortunately surrounded by cattle farms, which usually means there will be nothing alive in the river, and there was nothing here, so we continued on our journey and came to this amazing granite area. There was a little trickle of water, which was just enough for these little plants and brachyschum flowers to survive in. There was even enough water here for these little tadpoles, which were only just covered by the water. This species of brachyschum flowers looked amazing, growing up through the moss, which looked like miniature Christmas trees. This area was so vast and beautiful. It was such a unique and amazing place to be in. And to add to this magical environment was a fast-flowing, perfectly clear creek, which had carved out a path through the granite over thousands of years.
This area reminds me a lot of somewhere we've been before, the Galaxias National Park, with these sandy creek bottoms, the fast-flowing, really clear spring water. But this isn't actually sand, it's little crushed up bits of granite, which I guess is a type of sand, but it's not the same as you find on the beach. There's some really cool fish in here, and if we're really lucky, I think they could be the Galaxias, which I've been searching for ages, but have never been able to track them down. They're supposed to live in some of the creeks around Brisbane, but they haven't shown up when I've been there. But this really remote national park appears to be one of the few spots where the Galaxias are still holding out. They're such cool fish. I'm going to try and capture some of them on film.
Looking under the surface, this area was very visually similar to the Galaxias National Park, where we found the ornate rainbow fish. Only this is hundreds of kilometers inland. And just like the rainbow fish habitat, this creek was full of one species, the mountain Galaxias. They swim so quickly. I'm amazed by how much energy these little fish have. I've slowed down the footage in a few spots so we can get a good look at these fast-moving fish. Their long, slender bodies are perfect for fast-flowing mountain streams. It was very cold here too, with the water coming from somewhere underground, high up in this mountain. The Galaxias were very curious of my camera. and the remoteness of this area means they probably have never seen a camera before, and naturally came up to investigate, which was great for me because I got all of this fantastic footage of them swimming around investigating my camera. I'm so glad that we managed to find some. And this was the first spot we looked at. I decided to move on and see what the rest of the river was like, and on my way I encountered this beautiful butterfly, just managing to cling onto the grass in this harsh, windy environment. But just a few meters downstream, I put my camera in again, and there were some more mountain Galaxias, having no trouble with this very quick current. I didn't realize at the time, but in this footage, there is actually a baby Sutton's spiny crayfish, which is the species I really wanted to film on this journey because of how rare they are. This one is tiny, being only a few years old. They are extremely slow growing and get to be bright orange when they're old enough, living to be well over 40 years old. This, however, was unfortunately all the footage I managed to capture of this particular crayfish. But wow, I am just overjoyed to have filmed this rare little crayfish. The Galaxias don't get much bigger than these, getting to a maximum size of around 14 centimeters, but are more commonly around the 7 centimeter mark. And as I continued downstream, it only got more beautiful and more impressive. I have never been anywhere quite like this before, and although there were very little water plants, that didn't bother the mountain Galaxias. They are found from the bottom of southeast Queensland all the way down to Victoria, living in a wide range of habitats, from slow-moving swamps to fast-moving mountain creeks, all the way down into large lowland rivers. They can be found with other species of fish and crustaceans in creeks, but at higher elevations like this, they are also commonly the only species found in their creek. They have quite large mouths for their slim bodies and like to eat both aquatic insects and insects that land in the water. They will also eat small bits of vegetation. They move so quickly. It was really hard to get some clear footage of them, but as I slow this down to half or even 25% of the original speed of the footage, it means we can get a good look at the Galaxias. I continued downstream as far as I could go, looking at every part of this amazing creek. And eventually I came to this little waterfall. Of course, I had to see what was under the surface. But wow, what a spectacular view. It really doesn't get much better than this. And of course, when I went down to have a look under the waterfall, it was full of mountain Galaxias. I couldn't put my camera too far under the water due to the strength of this waterfall, but this was no problem for the little fish, who had no trouble keeping up with a force from this waterfall. And it was quite a deep pool that the waterfall had carved out. But I had a quick look around and I couldn't really get any further downstream, so I decided to walk back up and look in some more pools along the way, finding even more of these amazing little fish. In some of the higher mountains the Galaxias are found in, the rivers actually freeze over and can be covered in snow for 2 or 3 months of the year, which is no problem for these hardy little fish. Even this stream we're at now could potentially freeze over, as sometimes it does snow in this area. But the biggest threats to these mountain Galaxias are habitat loss and introduced species like trout, which amazingly the Australian government deliberately releases into native waterways, wreaking havoc on the poor, struggling native fish. It's disgraceful and shameful and should stop immediately. But thankfully, these amazing fish are doing relatively well compared to some of their relatives, and I am so happy to have found this population of them. I stopped at one more very deep spot, being around 4 meters deep and below another waterfall. And just like before, there were loads of happy little Galaxias swimming around in this location. This is obviously a perfect place for food, as any insects would be washed down this waterfall. As I walked back up to the car, I found this little carnivorous native plant, which is a type of Drosera, otherwise known as sundews. They are a very widely distributed plant, occurring all throughout the world, and Charles Darwin had a particular interest in them. They get the majority of their nutrients from the insects they trap on their sticky trichomes. I love finding these plants, and I am so happy to have found this amazing area filled with a mountain Galaxias. I hope you enjoyed coming along on this adventure and learning about these unique species and the habitat they call home. We will be continuing our search of this area for the next episode, where we make an incredible discovery. So until then, keep it murky.